and all the other intellectuals who are great. I'm a very, I'm probably a misfit in the sense I am not into, I am an agriculture scientist, strongly believe in biodiversity and everything. But I was actually wondering how I can be of a, of much intellectual input as compared to the stalwarts who are already there. I would have loved to even come down to Calcutta and meet all of you and learn from all of you, but for the constraint. Dr. Mukhopadhyay, if you don't mind, I have a couple of slides. I thought since the time is 10 minutes only, we can quickly run and I'll keep talking. If that is okay with the chairman, and I'll just share my presentation. Is that okay?
Yes.
Oh, you have to enable me to screen share, please. I find I'm not able to. It's not
just a second, ma'am.
Okay. So again, greetings for the Biodiversity Day, for the Environmental Day. And it's been a day of where we have been engaged in a lot of tree plantations and all across the campus. Everybody seems to be talking about the World Environment Day today. Having said that, let us try and see that each day is an environment day so that we continue to what we are trying to start today and remember actually stems into every day's objective. Let me just see if the yeah, just sharing. I think it should be. Is that okay? Can you see that? So, to all my friends, colleagues, and all the participants, it's a great honor for me, and I warmly thank all of you, all the organizers for inviting me. But I thought we must reiterate ourselves and remember that we are talking very lucky to have this workshop on the World Environment Day. The TF6 is really proud that one event has been on a very important day too, and that too organized by an organization which is so much involved in day-to-day issues concerning the communities, concerning the people, and also trying to nurture how do we manage biodiversity. Needless to say that all our activities, including science and technology development, somehow maybe impacts and sometimes disturbs, proving it to be detrimental. And it's the onus is on all of us to save our environment. So this workshop, which has been very adequately termed as Participatory Assessment of Ecosystem Restoration for Climate Resilient Livelihood, is, yes, under the TF6 of the T20. But please understand that the TF6 is charged with the mandate of accelerating SDGs and exploring various pathways as we try to go towards the 2030 agenda. So very adequately, we are looking at all apart, but I think I'm so much impressed with the objective that we would like to understand indigenous tribal communities, how they are involved in the assessment of sustainability of, the practices they follow inadvertently, and somehow help us to learn and try and say that these are adequate processes towards conservation, and how we can actually mainstream some of these with a dual purpose of trying to build a sustainable livelihood for all the people concerned, including the communities, and that will help us to achieve the SDGs. So As I said, the TF6 is, the theme is accelerating SDGs, exploring new pathways. The pathway new is not exactly new, I would even say novel pathways. And minute, I got stuck somehow. Yeah. So how do we operate? We realize that we have a huge canvas to work, the TF6. So we have divided through our own brainstorming in the committee that we work on about 7 main work streams. 1, food security, nutrition and climate smart agriculture. Water security and conservation, because water is equally one of the most important natural resources, which also health being one of the target. So we look at promotion of holistic outcomes in health. We've had some fantastic sessions across the country and even abroad. Preserving biodiversity and blue economy. Today's workshop actually is under this work stream. Gender sensitivity, we recognize women as the center stage of the entire G20 presidency this year, and how the sensitivity towards the recognizing and mainstreaming these into the SDG program is essential, leading to better investments and finally investing in children, and of course the Agenda 2030, and how do we build strong and partnerships which can go in a longer way. So this committee, my co-chair is Mr. Tardas and myself. Mr. Tardas is an economist, is from the banking sector and currently the fellow working, research fellow working in the research and information systems for developing countries. And I am basically by training an agriculture scientist, but working in innovation and also being part of the biodiversity and other related issues. We have a 14-member committee across almost spanning over Asia, Central Asia, Africa, Brazil, Indonesia, the past presidency, which is represented, and of course, stalwarts from across India, representing each of the 6 work streams I was trying to talk. And together, the entire committee is trying to take it forward. Since the inception, which was in January, on January 13th, 14th of the T20, we've been doing several events. In fact, now it is more than about 15. We've had main events, we've had side events, but the idea of these events is not conducting any event. It's more to garner, to see what is the across the different levels of society. So you could have different modes like workshops, dialogues, hybrid mode, in-person, research outputs coming out from small research, exploratory research, brainstorming sessions, panel discussions, and roundtables. We continue to participate not only across India. It's been a pretty busy time since January for all of us now. And we make it a point that TF6, either Mr. Tardas or me, are there in every of these events. Recently, we also participated in Berlin, where we hosted for the Global Solution Summit. And some of these issues also were talked at the international platforms. Apart from this, the TF6 received the highest number of responses to the policy briefs, which were floated in January. Well, we had a hard time, I must say, and we've had a very good response, particularly even in the biodiversity. Some of the policy briefs, which are now being, sort of reviewed, and then now about 4 have already been put in place on the website. Others will be following after the entire process. But basically, all these efforts are to garner and get and solicit respecting others' opinions, so that we gather all, consolidate them into a document with certain actionable directives. Recently, we have made the TFS 6 statement also, and put it up to T20. And it is in a short while, it will be put on the main website also. So we will be revolving our entire document along all these statements which we have put out with action. For example, Hyderabad at AGAB itself, we had conducted innovation-led entrepreneurial pathways for accelerating a one-day side event, where we had about a huge response across the ecosystem of innovators, from the formal system, informal system, community enterprises, women-led enterprises, all coming up and sharing what they are doing in their innovation paths, and what are the blocks, what are the challenges, or prompted them to take up that, and then recognize and identify certain actions which the G20 platform can definitely frame in such a way that we get some solutions. Yes, biodiversity, we have been a little much slower. We just had 2 in the water, blue economy, and but this probably would be one dedicated for biodiversity conservation. We've had other topics also, because let me also tell you, it's not talking only in one area. We find that there is an overlap of all the work streams. And finally, to the G20, we would like to put some 4 to 5 good action points which can be taken at the highest level and taken forward for the next presidency, which is in Brazil, a country which is almost similar to our way of thinking, our culture, as well as the issues are common. Some of the points which have come through the earlier one is almost all the forum recognize that technology, science-led technology, is definitely essential if we want to accelerate. It forms one of the path only to the SDGs. But one thing which emanated at the cultural level, at the people level, is how to bring about inclusivity. The access to technology, the problems, access to technology, and taking and mainstreaming some of the forgotten heroes and heroines is most important. And as we bring technology, we need to bring out the reskilling also, the options for trying to mainstream them with skills and building a cohort of skilled human resources. Equally important is investments, which are, we talked in Berlin in greater detail. How do we talk about investments, and not only for infrastructure, but the restructuring part also, because like, for example, digital tool emerged as a very important tool. How do we bring this tool into our sectors, particularly as we talk about blue economy or conservation of biodiversity, or even agriculture or CSA, the climate smart agriculture, etc. And another main important, and I would really draw the attention to all, we are talking to the SPBs, and I'm sure many other people who are working in the biodiversity framework, regulatory framework, the governance issues of environment, ESS, these are all things which have strongly been voiced across all platforms. And another thing is the connect with communities. Somehow this has come slowly emerging. It didn't come in the initial stages, but now it's a strong, formidable factor which is coming. So in today's discussion, we from TFS seek from the learned participants, first, please discuss, put up the proposals of what your mind is talking up, what you are seeing at the ground level. Let's listen to the high profile range of speakers put up by the host organization, IPRD, and let them put up their views. Out of this, let us stem and try and consolidate few actionable proposals for particularly in this area of biodiversity and preservation. I thought, and the scientist in me could not resist, a couple of minutes I would like to say about certain few episodes of two examples which are from this part of the country. Maybe many of you would be knowing about it also. But just to illustrate what I'm trying to look from TFS 6 of this. Netnampur Lake is one of a very old lake in the city of Hyderabad, which, you know, in Hyderabad during the Nizam era, we had a lot of water bodies being put. Over the years, as the urbanization of the city and time, we've had these lakes getting choked with other pollutants because of developmental efforts. I'm not saying we're against development, but this is a problem statement which has emerged. And I'm just trying to tell you through this intervention by group one innovator who is a trained person from IIT Roorkee, Ms. Madhulika, who actually worked out and has a phyto remediation technique. And along with, please understand, the collaboration comes in with an NGO has incorporated into the restoration of one lake. It's a story of almost 7-8 years, but then look at the number of actors. The entire, once everybody was convinced about the science part of the innovation, all the institutions engaged, the irrigation department, the municipality, the pollution control board, the fishery department, and of course the SPB from the local SPB. Everybody lent support if you call this as a success. What was it about? It was a simple, effective, some sort of what we call layered equipment, which can be, used with waste thermocol and plastic bottles so that they can float in the, what we call lake, but has been placed with a lot of other material and ultimately, important aquatic plants to absorb the pollutants. This lake is surrounded by a lot of high-rise buildings. Lot of problems like mosquitoes, etc. also come, but the migrant workers engaged in the infrastructure development in the buildings were again the source who could give these ideas, lend their ground level knowledge from villages and supplement them. And today, using this buoyancy principle, we have this equipment floating into the city, into the lake, with the plants which have their roots reaching into the water, and the hydroponic system allows the plants to grow in with the sunlight. Each of these rafts, which are joined, form an island, and it slowly moves across each the 2,500 square feet of the lake. Almost now 3,500 saplings have been part of this. It was also recognized that some of the cement debris, you know how it is in our country, all the rubbish which is dumped across the edge was threatening the biodiversity there. And then they have established a novel way of barricade on the bank. And this was much, found to be cost effective also, and scientifically tested to see the BOD is decreased. Currently, and I know a lot of students regularly are working on projects, particularly from the developmental, organizations and the courses run at TIS. The biodiversity is found to be definitely scientifically augmented, that is going ahead, increase. SPB is totally supporting. And the remediation of what we call a lake, which was supposed to, which is a heritage lake, but then not looked at, is now definitely on the path for first reformulation, I was saying, and then, allowing the nature when allowed. It just proves a simple principle to every student that nature can take care of itself if you allow it. I come from this example, to another story which is very close to some of you. I'm sure material in the bottles is very attractive to many of the younger generation. Makhana is a super food now recognized, but it's a traditional food from that part of our country, growing in almost fields which are there, but coexisting primarily because fish and makhana plant, which is a foxnut, grow together. Both serve synergistically, exist together, and things were going well because the fishermen could, the exudates from the weed are actually useful for the fish and serve as the, some of the organic matter is used for the fish. So it was a coexistence. But today, it's a little funny story in the sense we recognize that superfood and healthy food of makhana, and we have given a lot of value addition. We've had young entrepreneurs like Satyajit, who is a very well-known in the Better India and has actually led into an enterprise at the backward integration enterprise involving a lot of women as Shakti Sudha. But I just wanted to highlight, and it's an interesting article, which has actually come in a journal. You interested people can see, and I've given the link. A patent was, with makhana as this, a patent for making storage stable edible materials from its kernels was granted, which probably when science-led technology, the demand also increased. So a lot of publicity, and makhana is, if you look back in the last 10 years, has gone. Good for it, because that led to ICR even having a new center which was working only on makhana. But more and more water bodies started cultivating more of makhana and less of fish. And of course, the middlemen, as usual, do come in. So most of the fishermen went into looking at makhana because you get more prize money. So some of the aquatic biodiversity definitely got impacted. While makhana production has flourished, the ecological impact was there. The loss of ecology has led to some, traditional biodiversity getting impacted, livelihood getting impacted because many of the fishermen are only knowing fishing and suddenly have to understand makhana production, and many of them have become migrants. So you have an ecological, you have an economical, and you have a social impact. While science and technology is important, we must also learn to balance both, is what I'm trying to convey. I'm not against it, but we need to look at tools to balance both so that we let the nature do its job and we just tackle that process in that, giving better economic livelihood, because that is what SDG is about. So I just end with this saying, and I just wanted to set the thing. I'm sure everybody in the audience would be knowing both these cases. I just wanted to share and set the tone that we need to do both, conserve, have a gain to and access to biodiversity, understand the merit, understand the communities, understand the tribals who are involved, elevate their poverty, disseminate their poverty, elevate their livelihoods, and take them to a better level of livelihood generation without impacting ecological or environmental impact. So I end with only saying that let's go with this ethos that nature has organized, it's given you every bit of environment, tremendous heritage of natural resources, and these are all necessary for us in this planet. So people planet as what you have put in your main focus of this workshop is summarized only in this quote. And I just thinking, this is just indicative, please. I'm not putting any binding. My own recent interaction with a local group in Andhra, where we did with the tribals. If we are talking about climate change, perhaps we need to understand that adaptation to climate is more hyper-local, and then it goes into regional. We have to take these coping mechanisms with the community, and facilitate the overarching thing with facilitators like developmental personnel, and have certain prerequisites. These are not sacrosanct, but that's again indicative. If this is there and they're adopted, we'll reduce the mitigation. I mean, we can have a mitigation strategy and lead to SDP. With this, madam, I close here, and I would like all others. I look forward to a more enriching and evening.
Thank you so much, madam, for setting the context of this workshop. And as you have mentioned, we will certainly be having a discourse on how this community perspectives can be integrated in the policymaking agenda. Thank you so much for your kind deliberations. With the permission of the chair, sir, we have with us Dr. Sanjay Kumar. So may I have the privilege introducing Dr. Sanjay Kumar, our keynote speaker for this workshop. Dr. Kumar, he is a retired Indian Forest Service officer, while in his last tenure was the Director General of Forests, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Sorry. He was the Director General of Forests, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change of India. And presently, Dr. Kumar is holding the position of Deputy Secretary General Climate Parliament. Apart from a very able bureaucrat, technocrat, Dr. Kumar also has a very sound academic background. He has his PhD degree from Cambridge University and is instrumental in implementing, designing and implementing number of national level policies and programs in our country. So we are very much indebted to Dr. Kumar for agreeing to be with us today and sparing some of his valuable time with us. May I request Dr. Kumar to kindly share his speech.
So thank you, Raktima. Are you able to hear me clearly? Okay. So good afternoon, everyone, and greetings on the World Environment Day today. This is a momentous occasion for all of us today that we have gathered such a great luminaries today together on deliberating on topics which are truly relevant to us, all of us. Professor S.B. Roy has suggested to me that I should be talking something on food security and climate smart agriculture. I'm neither an agriculturist, not a food security specialist, so I don't have anything much to say. I'm, again, not a scientist, but I was very much looking into various things which are happening today. And the things which have a very broad impact on the society. And from that perspective, actually, I was trying to find out that what are the kinds of policies which could be adopted through which we could address some of the issues which Kalpana ji has just mentioned. No? And thank you so much, Kalpana ji, because you talked extensively, and I was actually wondering that in this 15 minutes which was allotted to me, what should I speak? It was very short of ideas, but you have covered most of the things. I would like to invite your attention to two things. One thing is with regard to the fact that the rupee-based economy is the most powerful driver of our policies today. Whatever policies we may enunciate in theory, in practice, it is always, and Purnimita ji is here, she will agree, that rupee-based economy is the actual, real actor in the field. And we are really struggling that how do we actually integrate all those concepts which Kalpana ji has mentioned and which are really important for us today and in the future into this rupee-based economy. Yeah. How on the one hand, we remain food secure, and on the other hand, we reduce the utilization of pesticide, insecticides, chemical fertilizer, and all other things, which not only increase pollution to the whole environment, but also increases greenhouse gas emissions, which has impact on climate change, and then climate change has an impact on agriculture. So how do we do that actually? If we simply say that to the farmers that your agriculture is going to be threatened because of climate change, it's very, very hard to convince them. No? We have been telling them, and I'm associated with one committee of Government of India on that for a particular region of the country. And what I see that in spite of all kinds of arguments which we give about the sustainability of their agricultural practices, about their horticultural practices, about their fishery practices, the clamor is with regard to higher production, which comes about with the greater utilization, with the larger utilization of fertilizers, pesticides, this and that, which of course have all the deleterious effects which we have just mentioned. So how do we do that? So that's a real question, and we're really interested to understand from you during the course of discussions today, that is there a way in which we could really tell the farmers that, look, your rupee-based economy is not going to be effective. What are the ways? How can we do that? That's a real challenge before us. So that's one aspect of which I wanted to highlight and seek your advice on that matter. The second issue, which I am really concerned about, that when we talk about food security, actually, I am not actually able to understand and be convinced that should we be talking about food security or nutrition security? Because if we are talking about food security, then it is not only about production of food grains, in whatever manner we produce, whether it is climate smart manner, whether it is organic, inorganic, or whatever. But food security also involves a lot of other components which are not related to production. They are related to management of food. Yeah? So that also is definitely has components which relate to climate, for example, storage, for example, transport, this and that, for example, processing. But then, in my opinion, nutrition security is the thing on which we should be focusing. And why I'm saying so, that because what I have felt is that because the dietary changes which have happened in the last few decades in most of the developing countries, particularly low income, middle income countries, including the island countries, have been so profound that some people call it that they have reached epidemiological scale. And then that is related to non-communicable diseases like hypertension, diabetes, and all that. We all know that out of the 6,000 cultivated crops, only 9 crops constitute 66% of the total production. So we now understand that what is the kind of dominance of certain crops. And these dominant crops are now being considered that they are essential for our food security, and all our efforts globally is on higher production of these 9 crops. By whatever means it is possible, by either diverting forest, etc., grasslands, etc., to agriculture, or by intensifying agriculture. And each of these have effect on climate, and climate in turn affects them. So, but The problem is that if we are changing our dietary habits, no, from the traditional food which Kalpana ji has just mentioned, from makhana and fish, to something else, then that kind of dietary changes have led to so many non-communicable diseases, and that is becoming very, very prevalent. Doctors are saying that NCDs, the non-communicable diseases now, they are the third largest killer of the humankind. So we must be concerned about all these things as well. Then the question comes is that how do we actually go back or maybe develop new ideas through which nutrition security is provided? And when we are talking of nutrition security, I see that the role of wild vegetables, wild grains, the traditional grains, biodiversity conservation becomes very, very important. So my simple submission here is that whenever we are talking at any fora at the policy level, shouldn't be our focus nutrition rather than food. So if we are able to shift our focus from food security to nutrition security, perhaps that would make a very, very strong case in which we go hand in hand with biodiversity conservation and climate smart production system for food. And that is what I wanted to say. And I would definitely like to hear your views and inputs into these two aspects, which I have just mentioned. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Roisa, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar. And the point that Dr. Kumar has put forward before us for deliberation, discussions, and the participants who are participating here, especially from the community experience side, would certainly be very much interested and how important it is to deliberate on nutrition security, the linkages between biodiversity conservation, nutrition security, and climate smart agriculture, and how important it could be in attaining the goals of SDGs. Thank you so much, sir, for setting the tone for this workshop, and certainly our speakers as well as the audience in their comments. We would like to welcome all of you to share your views on this. Our next speaker in the panel today is Dr. Ashwani Sanyal. As I have mentioned, Dr. Sanyal presently, he is the Secretary, Biological Sciences, the Asiatic Society, and is the former chairperson of West Bengal Biodiversity Board. Under his chairmanship of West Bengal Biodiversity Board, they have undertaken various innovative programs, progressed very well in involving the community for recognition of PBR and many other pathways work. May I request Professor Sanyal, Dr. Sanyal, to kindly have his deliberations.
Very good afternoon to everybody. I am audible? Okay. Very good afternoon to everybody. And I also, at the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to my very good friend and Dada, and Dr. S.V. Rai, Professor S.V. Rai, and for his invitation. After some times, I was very much glad and honored. And Dr. Mukherjee, she is also very much acquainted with me, and she is a very, very efficient lady, I would like to say, not scientist, efficient lady, having the power of leading the community towards the participation in biodiversity conservation for the development of livelihood. I also once again congratulate these two fellows who are doing a very good work in the field of biodiversity conservation, particularly in West Bengal. And there is nothing to say about the biodiversity. All of you know that beyond its importance as a conservation science and climate change implications, this biodiversity has a significant role in providing sustainable livelihood, especially concerning the rural and forest sectors. And if we consider here this forest sector, the biodiversity of the forest sector and its impact on the rural people, particularly the community people, and that the biodiversity conservation, and it is the primarily need realization and through sensitization and involving root level community members. It's well known. It's well known. And it's creating problem, echoing. Some echo is coming up. Achha. Then think concentrate at this moment towards the participation of in biodiversity conservation of the community. First, I would like to say that biodiversity is of the community, by the community, and for the community, because the biodiversity is conserved from time immemorial by the community people. In Calcutta, the people are not taking part any role there. They have any role in biodiversity conservation. But biodiversity is present in the rural areas mostly at this moment, and that biodiversity is being conserved by the community, by the local rural people. But the problem is this: in the forest sector, forest officials, managers are present. Still, I am taking this opportunity to say and that during 2015 to 2020, during these 5 years, in the world, 10 million forests are denuded. And if it is continued, this process and the pace is continued, by 2050, 223 million forest area will be able to, will get denuded. And one estimate says that every year, nearly 122 million hectare forest is being denuded, lost. So that if it is the situation, and in other ways we can see that the forest, nearly 68% of mammals are present live in the forest, and 90% insect species are present in the forest, and then 80% amphibians are present in the forest, 75% birds are present in the forest. But if the denudation, the loss of forest in such a rate that I have already mentioned, then where from, how this biodiversity will be conserved in the forest area where the community people are living? So that the first and foremost responsibility of all the sectors, that this forest is to be saved for the livelihood development of the community people, as because their livelihood depends purely on the biodiversity surrounding them. Secondly, another source of livelihood for those community people are the production in the farmland. But unfortunately, nearly at least 2 million people, they depend on the forest for their livelihood. And in 90% calorie and protein supply they get from the farmland production. But unfortunately, 80% of the world farmland are degraded. And in this context, it comes in my mind that today the World Environment Day, and in 2021, that United Nations decade of ecosystem restoration, that is up to that is 21 to 2030. And so that this is the high time to think about the ecosystem restoration, so that this community people can be saved, and they will get this biodiversity for their livelihood. And besides this, regarding the community participation of biodiversity conservation, it's a natural process that biodiversity is being conserved not only in India, all over the world, and it is from the prehistoric time. This community people are getting involved in conservation of the biodiversity and sustainable management of the biodiversity through conservation-based livelihood development. And we know that the biodiversity provides the suitable food, health, and livelihood that I've already mentioned. And the thing is this: for the community participation, Government of India, especially Government of India, after this Convention on Biological Diversity, the Act Biological Diversity Act in 2002, and the Biological Diversity Rules in 2004 was enacted. And with this act and rules, there is a definite provision towards the participation of the community through the Biodiversity Management Committee. In every level, the Biodiversity Management Committee is being constituted, and that has been constituted in the West Bengal and in every state level. And that and another part of this Biodiversity Management Committee, and that is led by the community people only. And the preparation of the People's Biodiversity Register, that already mentioned by Dr. Mukherjee, People's Biodiversity Register. And this People's Biodiversity Register is the instrument, main instrument towards the conservation of biodiversity. So that for livelihood development, biodiversity is most important component. And for conservation of biodiversity, this institution, that is the Biodiversity Management Committee, and also the preparation of People's Biodiversity Register, through which definite idea is to be percolated to the people, community people, what biodiversity, in which state, in which time are to be conserved. Which biodiversity is in danger. So that there is every provision, and this provision, the institutions are mainly focused the participation of the community towards the conservation of biodiversity for their livelihood development. So that, and in West Bengal, I would like to say that in every level, state level, all biodiversity management committees have been constituted, and under these biodiversity management committees, 3,800 something, 86 like this, People's Biodiversity Register have already been prepared, and it is being updated all the time, and that is really helping towards the conservation of biodiversity with participation of the community people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. As Professor Sastry has mentioned during her deliberations, how important it is under this discourse of the task force in the T20 to understand how the data can be captured and how community can be involved in collecting data and using those data as a decision support tool. So what you have mentioned the role of the community in not only identification of the biodiversity, but also to identify which biodiversity are to be conserved, how this can be conserved with the active participation of the community and their livelihood development. So I think this will be as one of the very important point in the final recommendations from this workshop. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. I know you will have to go to another meeting, but
Yes,
with us, so thank you so
thank
much.
you.
With the permission of the chair, Dr. Chakrabarti, may I now request our next, I don't say speaker, but the facilitator, Professor S.V. Roy. Professor Roy is the founder chairman of IMRAN. By training, Professor Roy is an anthropologist, but he has transformed himself into an ecological anthropologist, and his experience of working with the community right from the Andaman Islands to the Himalayas, the northeast, the southern part in the country, outside the country, and developing very important certain ethnologies, tools, as well as concepts for involving the community for biodiversity conservation, participatory biodiversity management, participatory ecosystem restoration are being accepted, implemented at different levels at the national and international level. So I will now request Professor Roy to kindly set the context of today's workshop and facilitate the discourse with the communities on how they can be involved in participatory ecosystem restoration and climate resilient livelihood. Professor Roy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mukherjee, Chairperson of the Committee, Dr. Purnamutala, and all others getting someone here, maybe from outside also. With the permission of you, I'll be talking in between Hindi and Kabhi. Friends, although many of you are aware that the rich biodiversity of the world are in and around the indigenous tribal community landscape. We are also aware that while celebrating the World Environment Day, we recognize, we appreciate how much the loss of biodiversity has been disaster in many forms. Its impact on the climate change. हम सब जानते हैं कि आज जो क्लाइमेट चेंज या जो हमारे सामने असुविधा आ रही है, आपदा आ रही है, इनमें बायोडायवर्सिटी एक मुख्य कारण और यह बायोडायवर्सिटी जो रिच है, घना है, वह जंगल के आसपास उन लोगों के पास है जो आदिवासी। मैं आपसे बोलना चाहूंगा एक बहुत अजीब बात। We all value traditional law. We all say that biodiversity, rich forest, ecological system, healthy environment is in and around the tribal area. Now, here we have seen that biodiversity and rich tribal, pure air, good water is around the tribal area. है ना? अच्छे जंगल, अच्छा पानी, अच्छा वातावरण इसके पास है आदिवासी। और एक बहुत आश्चर्य की बात है, इतना अच्छा वातावरण, बाढ़ की अच्छा पानी होने के बावजूद पूरे विश्व में आदिवासी का ट्राइबल ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट इंडेक्स इज लोअर ग्लोबली। यह है ना विचित्र बात। अच्छा वातावरण, अच्छा ट्रेडिशनल नॉलेज, अच्छी पानी, अच्छा एयर आदिवासी के पास भी है, और उनका ही ह्यूमन डेवलपमेंट इंडेक्स सबसे कमजोर है पास में। ये सोचने का विषय है। क्यों ऐसा होता है? जब एक ही परिवेश में सेम एनवायरमेंट, सेम विलेज, non-tribal have better human development index as the tribal do not have. That means something is wrong. And what's wrong? We have to analyze what's wrong. Here we have seen some of the practices, social structure, social system, the cultural practices which are important for good health, good food, good livelihood. Maybe it's not there. So we need to improve the social system, the ecological system, and the practices in the framework of the national policy. That we have to see that. So this is one point I wanted to raise, that we have to think very seriously what goes wrong when we vehemently say the tribal traditional knowledge. The second point, that if we are to conserve nature, natural resources, we have to also develop certain policies which are practical, applicable. I would like to raise here, Dr. Chakrabarti has been in the ministry of number of years. There are many listening over here. I have in front of me, many people have come from the different states in this hall. आप लोग राजस्थान से, मध्य प्रदेश से, उड़ीसा से काफी लोग आए हैं। इतने लोग मेरी बात सुन रहे हैं, ऑनलाइन भी जितने लोग मेरी बात सुन रहे हैं, those who are listening to me online and those who are listening over here, can you please tell me, आप ये बता सकते हैं कि आप जहाँ काम कर रहे हैं वहाँ के सभी आदिवासियों ने पीबीआर, पीपुल्स बायोडायवर्सिटी रजिस्टर बनाया है? आपने देखा है? जरा हाथ उठाएंगे। एक भी नहीं। Look at that. The PBR, the most important Biological Diversity Act 2002, which is the instrument of conservation, valuation, and benefit to the people who conserve through people's participation, it is not implemented very well the way it is. Most biodiversity people know about it. So here it has to be made simpler. It has become very complicated scientific document of number of pages, but hardly used by the time. So this is very, very important to simplify it, make it practical, applicable. This is the first thing I wanted to share. Second thing, if the tribal have to have their livelihood, अगर उनको अपनी जीविका बचानी है, the tribal have to have their livelihood, they have to measure the sustainability, the status of the conservation, the pathway where it is going. So do we think that most tribals have the ability to work with the people and also evaluate it? I will show simply in some places how in the village we can show simple method the tribal can show. So I will connect you with two films here only for demonstration. One is from Odisha, Livelihood district. Another is from Chhattisgarh, Kabir. What I wanted to share here, that the simple method has to be adopted, learned by the tribal in such a way that they can assess the pathway. They can know whether they are able to conserve the forest and they can plant the livelihood or not. So I will request you, Vijay is from Odisha. Vijay, आप मेरी आवाज सुन रहे हैं?
जी सर।
विजय, आपको मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
जी सर, सुनाई दे रहे थे।
I will demonstrate how people's participation, the tribal can assess the forest health. There are 7 criteria by CIFOR as even Bhopal India process about understanding the health of the forest, sustainability of forest. I will tell quickly the forest canopy cover, the forest floor regeneration, the species guild, the rare and endangered species, the 4th one, the 5th one, the population of the forest habitat demographic, the 6th one, the forest floor, the decomposition rate, and the water. These 7 criteria, how the tribal can show. विजय जरा आप दिखाएंगे आपके साथ जो आदिवासी हैं जंगल में घूम करके आप कैसे हमें समझाएंगे कि जंगल में ये आप लोग अध्ययन करके बता सकते हैं कौन सा जंगल का हिस्सा अच्छा है क्या होना चाहिए जरा बताइए I'm requesting Vijay how the tribal will assess the status of sustainability of the forest and better we see I hope you can see the tribal in the Odisha. Some of them they're the lower tribal and I want them to tell how they assess the health of the forest. हाँ विजय जरा बताइए
तुम ना कौन मो ना रतन भक्ता गाना ना अच्छा आज जंगल विषय जो 7 क्राइटेरिया 7 पद्धति जो थिला सुस्थ जंगल रो 7टा पद्धति रही से 7टा पद्धति प्रथम पद्धति कौन कहलो प्रथम पद्धति हला हमर गछ डाळ भिड़ी के भिड़ी आकाश देखा जाऊ नथिबारु सेटा हमें सुस्थ जंगल कुहा जाए गछ डाळ भिड़ी के भिड़ी थिबो आकाश को देखा जाए
With permission, from Professor Roy, I just want to translate. They are speaking in Odia. So after they speak, I'll just keyword I'll tell. So the point that he has mentioned, the first point is measuring density. So in villagers' town, they said where the sky is visible, that means density is less. And if the sky is not visible, so density is more. So like that, they assess the density of the forest as the first criteria. Next. फिर हम इसके बाद
2 नंबर 2 नंबर क्राइटेरिया पृथ्वीर हमर पृथ्वीर छोटा छोटा गछ छोटरू गछ बड़ होइथिबारु हम छोटा छोटा गछ को
The first criteria was fragmentation. The second criteria was the forest floor regeneration. That is examining and comparing which forest patch or compartment is better compared to others. और आगे बढ़ो ठीक है दूसरा
क्राइटेरिया
हला और देखो
हमर छोट छोट जंगल निकट पाखर थिबा आम पशु पक्षी प्राणी माने जल जल चर थिबो पक्षी पशु माने निचल चला बुला निचल जगह रे ए सब आमे सुस्थ जंगल मध्यम रे थाए
ठीक है
और चौथा 4 नंबर क्राइटेरिया कोन 4 नंबर
in the short time I just wanted to impress upon that the tribal could be trained to follow scientific principle combined with the traditional knowledge for assessing the health of the forest. And this is possible. If they are able to assess the health of the forest, they will be able to harvest in a sustainable way. Over-harvesting can be checked. This will be for conservation of the forest. And the third point, that once they know about the health of the forest, they can also apply for the sustainable livelihood. And for the sustainable livelihood, I mean, just a few points over here, adjacent to the forest. If there is any agriculture field, so the agrobiodiversity, the forest biodiversity, and water body. So the agrobiodiversity, agroecosystem, forest ecosystem, aquatic ecosystem, these are interdependent. So the villagers plan their livelihood keeping in mind the sustainability of the aquatic ecosystem, agrobiodiversity ecosystem, forest ecosystem, the pasture ecosystem, if there is a wetland, the wetland ecosystem. And I will show how in this area, all 5 ecosystems, the neighbor, conservation, and interdependently managed by the community. So I wanted to share in short that we have to understand the tribal or non-tribal, the social system, the cultural practices in order to see how their social system, traditional knowledge can be combined with the scientific knowledge for conservation. So this is the first point I will repeat. The second point, like Biodiversity Act PBR, the assessment of the forest has to be made simpler, practical. Otherwise, we may go for preparing thousands of PBR, but neither the people can make use of nor the tribal. So this is very, very important from the policy point of view, reflecting on the notion of PBR. We can't change the Biodiversity Act, but we can modify the PBR. And the third point for recommendation, that wherever we plan for the livelihood, all 4 ecosystems, forest, agriculture, water, has to be seen not in isolation, but as an interdependent system. Yeah, and Sonuram, you have Sonuram मध्य प्रदेश में दिखा रहे हैं. सोनूराम जरा दिखाओ कि देखिए वहां पर इन लोगों ने मध्य प्रदेश में छत्तीसगढ़ कबीरधाम जिले के छत्तीसगढ़ में you can see here they have learned on the forest fringe area organic farming for their livelihood. What kind of organic farming on the forest fringe area will help conservation of soil, water, and also the quality of the food, health. This has also they have prepared the seed bank to conserve the grains which are traditional, more healthier compared to what people get from the people's government supply. So in short, just to conclude, we have to reflect the policy, make it simpler. It is possible to involve community for assessment of the health of the forest. It is possible to involve community in understanding the interdependence ecosystem like aquatic, agriculture, pasture for farming, and for health of the community, human development, or any kind of thing, it has to be linked with the culture and the soil. It's simpler, practical. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Roy, for demonstrating how community can be participating in this translating the very sophisticated scientific criteria and indicators for measuring the forest health into practice, how we can involve them in measuring their forest health, the ecosystems, and then they can take decisions for their actions, as well as how this climate resilient livelihood can be developed by integrating all the interrelated or five interrelated ecosystems. Thank you very much. As time was short, so we cannot have detailed interaction with the communities, but those who are interested, we can share link with you for further interaction. We have this cases from Chhattisgarh and Odisha, and from Rajasthan, we will be listening in the Q&A session. So our next speaker in this session will be next panelist. We are having from the Netherlands, a young professional, Ms. Femke van Bozik. She is joining us from the Netherlands. Femke is a water professional with an interdisciplinary background in water science, political science, and sustainable development. She is passionate about landscape restoration, creating more conducive local climates, water governance, and implementing integrated water resource management solutions. She is currently working as a program manager at Meta, the Netherlands. Her work focuses on managing and improving local climates to create conducive and resilient conditions for both ecology and agriculture. We welcome Femke as our next panelist for this session. Welcome.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. I prepared some slides. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Let me check. Do you see my screen now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so my name is Femke and I'm working with Meta. Meta is a social enterprise in the field of land and water management, and we work in many countries, including India. We're currently running a project together with Pradhan, FES, and another Dutch partner in the Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand states. And today I would like to talk to you about the local climate management approach that we try to integrate into our projects. And yeah, we really see this as a third way to respond to climate change, next to adaptation and mitigation, and really a more bottom-up approach, which is why I think it really fits into the discussions that are happening today. But I will explain more in a second. So maybe before we dive into the concept of local climate management, it would be good to do a little talk on what local climates actually are. So here on this picture, you see the northeast of India on a macro climate scale. So this is very big, and the macro climate is basically determined by the distance from the sea, which season we're in, the latitude, so the distance from the equator, and of course the altitude. And this really determines the climate on this large scale. So this shows why the India has a different climate than, for example, the Netherlands, where I'm currently at. If we then zoom in a little bit more, so here you still see the same town of Kumla in the right bottom corner, but this is on a mesoclimate scale. So this is up to 100 kilometers. And this mesoclimate is determined by the elevation, the aspect, the slope or distance from lakes, all these kind of factors. So you already see that here the landscape surface already has more influence on the climate than the macroclimate. If we then zoom in a little bit more, so now we are in the town of Kumla on a farm actually, we see the microclimate, and this is on a scale below than 100 meters. And this microclimate is really determined by the presence of windbreaks, hedgerows, shading, soil moisture and more. So this really determines that a farm on one side of the village can have a completely different microclimate than a farm on the other side of the village. And both the mesoclimate and the microclimate are the results of the local landscape. And this is what we define as the local climates. Local climates are basically built up from different components. So solar radiation, air temperature, soil moisture, soil temperature, air humidity, and the wind direction and speed. And how the land looks like will actually determine how these 6 factors interplay with each other. So for example, if there are many trees, these trees will break the wind, so there will be less wind speed, which will then also have an effect on the soil moisture and the soil temperature. So it's really a system that is at play here. And this also shows that, of course, landscapes are really variable, and the high variability of this landscape actually results in a mosaic of different macro and microclimates spread over landscapes, and also spread, of course, across the whole globe. And this is an example of how even on a farm scale, you can see significant differences. This is a remote sensing picture from a farm in Chile. And on the upper right corner, you see that the soil temperature, land surface temperature is actually way higher than, for example, on the left side of the farm. And in this case, this is due to differences in soil moisture. So you see that where areas where it's drier on the farm, the temperature is also higher, and on areas where there's more soil moisture, you see that the temperature is actually less. And this is actually really good news, because the fact that different landscape characteristics actually result in different local climates means that we can intervene in the landscape, and through that we can actually improve the local climate. And this is what we call local climate management. And we really see local climate management as a third way to deal with climate change. So next to adaptation and mitigation, because it can lead to temperature reductions of up to 1.5 to 2 degrees locally, which is in the global warming bandwidth. And yeah, what we really like about it is that it can be managed locally. So it's really a bottom-up approach that can be done by communities itself. It's also really integrating indigenous knowledge and making use of the knowledge that communities and farmers already have, and using this as a new approach to combat climate change. Another factors that it can be monitored, as I just show on a remote sensing picture, but you can also easily place sensors in landscapes or on farms. And you can actually really track the differences in the local climate on such a small scale, which is of course more difficult to do it for the whole globe. And of course, creating better local climates has large co-benefits, especially for example, agriculture, as it will create more suitable conditions for crop growth, also less crop damage. What we saw in our projects is that we can actually create better local climate buffers that create better conditions for crops to grow, even when the global climate change is, of course, as we all know, unfortunately happening really fast. It also allows for more and more diverse crop production. And this directly links, of course, to improved livelihoods of the local communities. This is an example of a landscape where certain local climate management practices are integrated. So what we see here on the left side are terraces. What terraces do is when it rains, the moisture won't run off the hill really fast, but through the terraces, the runoff will slow down and the water will sink into the soil, which will improve the soil moisture levels. Same is on the right side for the micro basins, soil bonds, side pits. It's really to keep the moisture in the landscape instead of letting it run off and causing erosion. And what this moisture harvesting all will do, it will really improve the temperature buffering capacity. So the more moisture there will be in a landscape, the better it will be able to buffer its temperatures. So this is just an example of practices that improve the moisture and through that improve the local climate management, and how this can really be done both on a farm scale. So for example, the soil buns and side pits, or floodplain farmland, making use of floodplains, but also more on a landscape level by placing check dams or doing terraces on a landscape. These are some real life pictures from the field. So here we see trenches, we see stone lines, we see the terraces, we see the eyebrow terraces, like the smaller ones, which are usually used for growing trees. So within these half moon circles, seeds are planted, and because the water is better harvested, the seeds will have enough water to actually grow. What we see here are stone lines, which are also used to reduce runoff and really make sure that the moisture is seeped into the soil and will increase soil moisture levels and through that buffer the temperature. There was actually a study done in Ethiopia. So in Ethiopia, on a watershed scale, they improved the watershed by implementing all these water harvesting mechanisms. So for example, here you see the creation of a pond where the rainwater where the harvested rainwater will be running into. So the water will stay in the landscape. And on the left side here, you see trenches with the same effect. And these researchers from the University of Florence, they actually found a reduction of 1.74 degrees Celsius in land surface temperature in the 4 months after the rainy season, compared to before all these interventions happened. So this actually shows that we can take matters into our own hands and really work on a local scale to create these buffers against climate change. This is another example of how we can improve local climates, but then by using vegetation. So a big one, of course, is the preservation and management of forests. We can also do roadside tree planting. We can use trees as wind protection. Agroforestry is also a big one with huge effects on local climates. Of course, when the forest is unfortunately already gone, you could do reforestation. And it doesn't only have to be trees, it can also be hedgerows or smaller kinds of vegetation. And what it will actually do, by increasing the amount of vegetation in the landscape, the climate will be regulated. Because it slows down the winds, it attracts rain, so it will improve the rainfall reliability, and it will make some shade that will lower the evaporation and thus increase the soil moisture levels. So here is another example of how increased soil moisture. So on the right side, you see a farm with different kind of, how do you call it, spots on the farm. So here you see one area with a really low soil moisture level. And then on the left side, you directly see that this corresponds also with a higher land surface temperature. So this really shows that by improving the soil moisture, we can actually lower down the temperatures as well. So that corresponds to the example from Ethiopia I just showed. And the same goes for vegetation cover. So this is the same farm, and you see that the vegetation cover here is way less, which directly corresponds to a lower land surface temperature as well. And with this story and the concept of local climate management, we really advocate for seeing the world as a global mosaic of different local climates that can actually be systematically managed area by area and local climate by local climate, which is truly a bottom-up approach to restoring land health and protection against climatic extremes. And because this is so bottom-up and can be done on the smallest scale, even just in a backyard, farmers can do it. Farmers can also work together to, for example, improve a whole watershed, but it's really in the hands of the community. And it's really bottom up. And what we also do in this approach is really putting the knowledge of the community central and really making use of these indigenous knowledge. For example, this morning I saw in the newspaper that there was a new study by on the Amazon in Brazil, and they actually found that the landscapes that were under management of the indigenous communities actually had a 23% bigger tree growth than the areas that were not under management of indigenous communities. I just read that this morning. I can send you the link to the article if you're interested. But to me, that really shows that the indigenous communities have so much knowledge on how to actually restore and maintain their environments and keep a good local climate. And I would really advocate for making use of this indigenous knowledge in shaping up our policies and integrating this into our management of these ecosystems and of these natural landscapes. So as Meta, we also wrote a book about this, which can be seen on the right side here. It's a handbook on how to implement these kind of practices into any landscape. And also we talk about how to monitor these changes. If you're interested in this book, I can send you a soft copy, so you can contact me through my email, which is down here below. Or you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm really happy to share a copy with you. We also have a website called The Water Channel. So if you're interested in reading more about this topic, please go there and you can find a lot of information. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to discuss this more in depth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Femke. It is such an excellent presentation, and it gives us hope, because all of the time we are discussing about the climate change and how pathetic it is, how it is impacting us, but you have come up with such innovative, technically economically viable solutions. And I'm sure such kind of initiatives will help our mankind, humanity a lot to combat this climate change, climate extremes, as well as meeting the sustainable development goals. Thank you so much. Our next panelist for today is Professor Purnamita Dasgupta. We are so thankful to Professor Dasgupta for sparing her valuable time. She has come all along from Delhi to us today to be with us in this workshop. Thank you so much, Professor Dasgupta. Professor Purnamita Dasgupta, she is Chair in Environmental Economics and Head Environmental and Resource Economics Unit, Institute of Economic Growth, University of Delhi. She has also been visiting professor to Cambridge and Johns Hopkins University. She has been member of several environment-related committees set up by the Government of India, legislation on electronic waste, Supreme Court Committee on NPP for forests, expert committee to evolve environmental standards. She actively engages in public discussions on the environment. She does her research on valuation of ecosystem services, climate change adaptation and mitigation, econometric applications to environmental concerns and health economics. She is an author with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, International Panel on Social Progress, and the Himalayan Mountain Assessment. Thank you, Professor Dasgupta, for being with us. And may I request Professor Purnamita Dasgupta to kindly have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me at the Royal Dr. Mukhopadhyay, and Dr. Pratik, and all of us who are here. I honestly am overwhelmed to be here because over the years, I have learned a lot about the communities by coming to Iran and by interacting both Professor Roy and Dr. Mukhopadhyay. So I feel a bit hesitant to sort of put forward some ideas. But nevertheless, let me try. You are always very familiar with me, so let me try. To start with, I think let me congratulate you on organizing this event. As India's leads to take leadership on the table in representing the global south through G20, T20 processes. Dr. Kumar raised a very valid point on nutrition security, food security, lots of other relevant comments about city conservation. We have this millets program that we launched in a very way. But listening to all of this and looking back at my work, I thought I would take this opportunity to share with you some of my struggles. There are no solutions. I look forward to solutions from all of you, but struggles as one looks more and more what one calls in English as integrated approaches. So we all agree honestly that we want integrated approaches. We want biodiversity conservation. We know that this is the way forward. We know it in our blood. We know it through our playwrights. We know it through our poets, our musicians. That's what comes to your mind when you sit here. There are many, many other such things, right? So, in the midst of all this, how can we continue to sort of sing these beautiful songs that so many patriots and nature lovers have given us? Now, probably, I think two kinds of things that are happening today. One is the discussion along things I will focus on integrating approaches. So one is this thing along rights of people, which we all understand, rights of people, and which one can never do enough for, I see. And there's always seems to be so much you can improve upon for rights of people. Parallelly, however, I think it has taken time for the world to recognize what is also happening is we are recognizing that you need, if you want to be integrated, you have to also have rights to nature. So one of the ideas is to have in parallel rights to nature and rights to people, without alienating one versus the other, and without I think that is where the global south gets into a little bit of a conflict with the global. When we think that the global north is trying to tell us to prioritize the rights of nature over the rights of people, and the global south thinks we should be prioritizing the rights of people over rights of nature, and for some very, very important reasons. That we think like that. So the idea is, how do we get the rights to nature and the rights to people moving parallel? And this is where, in a big way, community comes in. Without community, you can't have an integration. That's the starting point. We have to understand that. So I think my idea is to think around how do we overcome barriers, communicating local knowledge, indigenous knowledge. It's not that there is no knowledge. It's not that scientists do not appreciate it, but we haven't found the platforms where scientists So that is one idea. For example, let me talk about, I don't know how many of us get things really, but we have sort of declared a right to nature recently when we have declared in 2017, the Madhya Pradesh government declared the Nanda River as a living entity, and it was upheld by the courts. It's challenged, but it was upheld by the courts. Similarly, the Gangotri and Yamunotri glaciers, that river Ganges and the Yamuna have got some kind of framing in terms of that. And the challenge is how to implement it. I take another example, invasive species. Now, there's a lot of things, invasive species coming back, right? We need to take it out, remove it. But there is a lot of writing now recognizing that there is indigenous and tribal knowledge on how some invasive species help clean up pollution in water bodies. So while there are invasive species that should be removed to improve water quality to enhance soil fertility, there are also species that can actually help you clean up your water bodies. Now, this knowledge would never have come to the table if there hadn't been an interaction between the scientific community and the medical community. So that's one example that. A second example we have of the need for bringing the two together is when one balance modern technology with good field practices. So, for example, and here I'm flipping and talking about social responsibility. Responsibility also, when we want it to come in, we cannot impose social responsibility without community participation. So consider the fact that many of our hill regions today, there has been a lot of installation of electric pumps with no social restrictions. Groundwater has been needed, and this is not just for India, throughout the industry region. And today, the springs are all drying up here because of the excess rain. And one of the models that is strongly being put forward is, what if you forget to bring the community in your process of trying to regulate it? And that is the part, the model that is now being formed. Of course, we have had this history with forest fires, for instance, with JFM. We have a lot of experience on the table. Maybe we should try and now build those into platforms. Finally, you can say that so all this is easier said than done. So are there any ways in which we can measure these outcomes? Are there ways in which we can measure these outcomes? This is a second question, and something that is wrote in my mind. I've spoken about then, hoping we can do something like some point soon. We have to think of measuring outcomes which are really necessary or which are actually, integrated and which are actually embedded within human society. Because when your outcome is embedded within human society, it becomes more effective. It's not only about nature. So, what is an outcome that sort of impacts all of us? It's human health. Human health is something that we all just sort of immediately get even emotional about, right? Touches all of us. So, in context, we cannot have evidence coming, evidence is relevant. What can we do to reduce that evidence? Thailand is a country which was given a legal right, basis, a legal framing, something called a community element matter. And what is good? And the WHO, World Health Organization, has come up with guidelines on conducting community matters. What is it? So I want to share with you what it is. So it recognizes that communities know through their from their ancestors and from their traditional practices how to do what is known as eco-centric caregiving. And there is now evidence that of setting up care farms, community gardens, where they are finding that the elderly with dementia, children with disorder behaviors, they tend to drink more water, take their medicines on time, and have better nutritional outcomes, better nutrition status, when they are placed in such community settings where there is a lot of greenery, where communities are able to take care of them once they are trained in ecosystem ways and ecosystem caregiving. So I would like to wrap up saying that, you know, we need to think of more innovative ways of doing this. There are some models there. It's hard to do, it's challenging. I think we have a lot of depth in our society, in our community, and should be able to do try out some of them and document this knowledge. Thank you once again for inviting me, and really, you know, it's a pleasure to listen to everyone on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dasgupta, for your very thought-provoking presentation, I must say. It is so fresh, creative, and innovative, and I'm sure we will have more opportunities for having such discourse and insights from your end. We will have now the presentation from our speaker from Nagaland, Ms. Bano Haralu. Bano Haralu is presently working with the Wildlife Conservation Society. She is a senior conservation consultant. Yes, welcome, Bano. She has been involved with environment conservation since returning to her home in Nagaland state in 2010. She pioneered a bird and wildlife survey for the Forest Department, leading to the publication of the book on birds of Nagaland. In the year 2011, she coordinated a survey to determine the status of wildlife in the state for the Forest Department in 8 locations across the state. She formed the Nagaland Wildlife and Biodiversity Conservation Trust in 2013 that focuses on wildlife conservation education in Nagaland. And as many of you must be knowing Bano as a very veteran journalist, she has a tenure with Doordarshan and other national channels, and award-winning journalist and environmentalist, conservationist. We are so happy to have Ms. Bano Haralu with us today. She's joining from Nagaland, one of the richest state with having the most rich, deep traditional knowledge and practices for conservation. Welcome, Ms. Bano, and the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. And it's my honor, my privilege to be amidst all of you. And yeah, you have said so many words, and you have also attributed Nagaland with so much of environmental sensitivities. But I'm very ashamed to share with all of you today that the Center for Science and Environment report has ranked Nagaland as at the bottom state, almost the bottom state in environmental standards. And so this is, of course, a very, very serious concern for all of us, knowing that, thinking that Nagaland is a community-led conservation state. And I think this has very serious implications. And what we have been discussing today is something that will be very, very required strongly in states like Nagaland and across the Northeast. And the factors that have that were cited for this, the indicators were loss of forest cover, which is one of the first steps of biodiversity conservation. And the other two factors were on sewage. That is, again, the other extreme of development, and how municipalities are being managed, and how waste, for example, the legacy of waste has been, these three factors have been very clearly pointed out, which have out of the 10 indicators, which have placed Nagaland in this really abysmal ranking of states across India as far as environmental factors go. But having said that, I also think that the intrinsic strength of indigenous communities are the people who inhabit the land, and somewhere something is going amiss in the communication. And when we are in the field, I'm often asked, what crops will they grow? They want to grow cash crops. And what are the crops that they can grow? And the seeds that are being supplied to them are not friendly for the soil. And so they are, most of the times, they bear, their insect pests, attacked by pests, or the very next year they are unable to use the same plot of land to cultivate other crops, because the soil is already damaged. And so we have a very strange mix of interests coming up, which is the action of the state players, and at the ground level, the community and the organization of the community. Large parts of the Northeast, and particularly in Nagaland, I think the farming sector is still very, very subsistence. It's still foraging. We are still foraging farmers. There is no organized farming. And so my appeal here today on this very, very august platform is to look at how the indigenous seed, the climate resistant seed, those can be encouraged. And there are still pockets all over not just Nagaland, all over the Northeast, where climate resistant seeds, which are being used by indigenous, whether it's maize, whether it's millet, whether it's different kinds of beans, whether it's medicinal plants, these are still being used. But there seems to be a system where to organize all of this and to encourage this and to propagate this. And of course, then comes the marketing aspect of all of these. The absence, the total absence of interrelations between one village with another, in terms of even governance, or in terms of even coming together to get a better price and a better price for their commodities, for their produce. That also seems to be absent. And I think it has already been brought out by Meta, and I really appreciated the fact that they want to use, they've been using mapping techniques. And so when we talk about science and technology, there is this a vast potential across India to employ the youth in mapping our territories, in mapping our land, and especially the land usage pattern. We have no idea about how lands are being used. There is no mapping of how much land is being used for Jhum, how much is being used for wet paddy, how much is going, what is the forest cover of a village, so that the communities can plan better and they can understand what are the resources that they have, and they can also be trained and educated in also planning to know in the years ahead, what are the things that they are going to require, why it is important for them to revive, restore their traditional springs. But even in this, we don't have any scientific studies on where the aquifers are, and how, can we use technology, can we bring science and technology to help indigenous communities at the local level to claim and protect and restore these traditional springs, because water is going to be, as we know, is something which is already in shortage. And we think about the green hills, and we think about the the verdant, lush green hills of the Northeast, but it's the reality is quite contrary. There is huge problems of water shortage which are coming up, and along with water shortage is that the increasing instances of pest attack. And in across, except for the state of Arunachal Pradesh, which is a huge state, the other states of the Northeast are tiny. Like, for example, Nagaland is just 16,500 square kilometers, and just a small percentage of that is cultivable. And so it becomes even more important that we gear communities, educate communities, engage with communities. And when it comes to the assessment of the biodiversity resources and the livelihood sustainable livelihood practices, the input, the involvement of the communities is always almost absent. And earlier, I think one of the speakers mentioned about Dr. Roy, I think Professor Roy mentioned about the absence of the People's Diversity Report. And I think this is biodiversity report. And this is something which I think goes a long way in making communities understand what they have lost, what they can regain, and making them giving them a pride, and giving the youth in that village a pride that there is interest in what they are doing. And I find that I would like to end on this note that very often, communities, indigenous communities, feel very alone in their struggle. And I think one of the aspects is to connect, make these connections through all these interventions, and so that they understand that they are not the only ones. And I think excursions, visits to successful, sustainable, good practice locations is also something that is very, very empowering for communities. But more than along with that, I think the other inputs are, of course, the very, very urgent need for education in this climate change, and also giving a space, creating innovative ways and means for communities to know that what they have, that indigenous knowledge, what they have is actually the beginning of science. And that how do we marry these two, the traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge, we bring it to their doorsteps, so that they are able to participate, and we give that space, and we give that training in technology. I think somebody mentioned earlier about using technology widely, and how we could give a sense of pride, especially I keep talking about the youth, because we have to engage their interest in agriculture. Otherwise, how do we provide food for our country, for the world, for ourselves? Because the older generation is going to pass away, and how we pass on, how do we make agriculture an attractive occupation, a profession, a service. And I think these things come about with provisions for, water management, irrigation, what we've talked about for so many years. We all know what needs to be done. I think it's now, I think the emphasis also is in joining hands together and working together and getting it done. I think that's very, very possible. And in a platform like this, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
For excellent deliberations and the very important points that you have raised in terms of conserving indigenous seeds, climate-resistant seeds, medicinal plants, and how we can engage the youth, which is very, very important. The intergenerational integration of knowledge, of technology, of traditions, and blending the traditional knowledge with the scientific knowledge. So these are all so very important, pertinent issues, and how we also can develop a connect, not only among the villagers to villagers, and one village to outside, and then at the broadest perspective at the national and international level. So thank you very, very, very much, Banu, for putting your ideas forward in this workshop. And we will be finalizing the workshop recommendations, and we seek your inputs in finalizing, all the speakers' inputs in finalizing the recommendations. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And friends, we have heard from the Northeast. Now we will be going to United States, USA. We are having with us our very good friend, Jeffrey Y. Campbell. Very good friend of ours. We have long association with Jeff since the early 1990s. Jeff is born and part of his childhood he spent in India. He can speak very well in Hindi and Punjabi. We have spent years together with Jeff, a very memorable experience with him. Jeff was the manager of the Forest and Farm Facility at FAO in Rome. He has over 3 decades of experience in community forestry, rural development, and philanthropy. Before joining FAO, he worked at the Christian Fund as director of grant making, and at the Ford Foundation in India, Nepal, Indonesia, and New York as program officer, senior program officer, and deputy director. And Jeff brings with him a repository of experiences of people, their traditional knowledge, and how community they conserve the nature, and this can be a game changer in the conservation practice. So welcome, Jeff, in this workshop, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Namaskar. आवाज सुनाई दे रही है?
हाँ, सुनाई दे रही.
Very good. Great. It's a great honor and a pleasure to be invited to speak with you from the forests of Virginia. I'll be joined occasionally by some of the wildlife and the birds, which will be improving on what I have to say. I know Raktima and SB, who is one of my gurus for many decades now. And it's very kind of them to bring a retired person here to speak. And since my own knowledge is somewhat limited, speaking on these subjects, I thought at least I should wear an Adivasi topi, because although it's not red, sir pe rangili topi pehen ke fir bhi dil hai Hindustani. So, as the Raktima said, I spent a large portion of my life in India, so it's really a great pleasure. I wanted to start just because we heard, in fact, I believe one of the speakers was on the intergovernmental panel on climate change. I wanted to read a statement that's now very much part of that document. Human communities, especially indigenous people, and those more directly reliant on the environment for subsistence are already negatively impacted by the loss of ecosystem functions, replacement of endemic species, and regime shifts across landscapes and seascapes. Indigenous knowledge contains unique information sources about past changes and potential solutions to present issues. This is extremely noteworthy because this is a panel of scientists who themselves, until very recently, as a body, have given far too little attention to the depth of indigenous knowledge. But it's never too late. I just read in the paper yesterday where the Canadian Army is training in the far north, where it's extremely cold, a region. And they're working with the local Inuit Eskimo community. And they were going on a very large exercise because the weather predictions by the meteorologists said that weather will be fine. But the elders from the community said, no, you can't go tomorrow because we saw a dog moon. Dog moon means a particular a moon which was surrounded by ice crystals. They said this means there'll be a huge storm tomorrow. And the scientists and the military said, no, but weather prediction is fine. But they decided to follow the advice of the elders, and they were able to save many lives because, in fact, the following day was a huge storm. The reason I say this is just to show that, what now we are all talking about, that indigenous people and local communities have a unique cultural, geographical, spiritual, political, social context in which they are co-actors. Unlike many other populations of humans, they generally feel that they are inhabiting as partners of a landscape, partners with other non-human actors, which have their own knowledge, which must be observed and to which they are part. So they have an opportunity to really and must mobilize and enhance this knowledge, particularly with climate change. We know that there are so many different ways that indigenous and local communities observe things. Many of these are quite similar, but some are quite different from the way scientists usually look at indicators, etc. But we know that the flowering patterns of trees, is it flowering early? Is it flowering late? Are there more flowers, less flowers? We can gauge many things from that. The behavior of animals, the insects. We had an indigenous Mayan person come to FAO and he said, you have lots of experts. Do you have an expert on ant behavior? Because we have an elder who observes ant behavior. Based on that ant behavior, we can tell a lot about when we should plant, when we should harvest, what will happen in the weather. Changes in the winds, changes in the clouds, even the amount of milk which cows are producing in a given year, that can give an indication. In South America, in Cusco, in the Andes, in Peru, the scientists wanted to work with farmers who are growing 500 varieties of potato to see which ones will do better under climate variation conditions. So the scientists came and they started planting each variety in a line, in a row. And the indigenous people came and said, "Bhai, tum log to bilkul hi pagal ho. You scientists are mad. The scientists said, why? They said, don't you know potatoes grow in families? They grow with other potatoes, and different varieties of potatoes need each other to grow well. The scientists said, well, what do you suggest we do? We will plant families in different rows. We will plant families in different sites, dry site, wet site, north site, south site, and we will see how the family of potatoes manages. So you see, it's a different way of looking at it. When we were doing interviews in the Congo, in Africa, with communities about what are the changes in climate change, one of the community members said, you know, we know that the climate is changing because the song of the river has changed. Before it was brum, drum, drum, drum. Now it's pat, 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 pat. We don't have a scientific journal article on variations between pat, pat and dur, dur. But these are indicators which actually mean something to local people, and they can detect subtle changes often, which are not there. I think we have so many examples, and you would have already, we heard some. What I appreciated very much was hearing the different language which was used by our colleagues in Orissa, who were explaining the scientific indicators. They were using much more simple words. You don't have to say canopy cover. You can just say how much sky. You don't have to say understory vegetation. You can say how many small plants. This kind of language is perhaps more easily understood and maybe more sophisticated in some ways than some of our scientific terminology, which we get very attached to. So I think you know, there's many very important reasons why indigenous knowledge must be incorporated. But I think it's also important to understand that this knowledge differs according to gender, also in indigenous peoples and local communities, according to age, according to whether people are still active on the land, as was mentioned before, with many people leaving farming. It has depended on intergenerational transmission. Songs, stories, dances, rituals. These are the libraries. Do we treat them with the same respect as we'll do a library full of books or a big database on a computer? Information in many indigenous communities is not divided by scientific disciplines in boxes. I am a soil person, I am an insectologist, I am a snake person, I am a this, I am an agronomist, I am a this. No, it has to be much more holistic. As I mentioned before, according to many indigenous communities, non-human neighbors themselves possess knowledge. Trees are knowledge holders. Many of them have been around a lot longer than any of our scientists. Individual communities of plants are also adapting. They are themselves struggling with these changing indicators, respecting and observing how their knowledge they are displaying and their resilient adapting is going on is absolutely critical. But it's also true, as was mentioned by the previous speakers who have really said everything I could say already, a co-creation of resilience is needed. We need to match local indigenous knowledge with scientific data, with government programs, with opportunities to connect to new markets, etc., to arrive at new scenarios and plans. So I'll get to the end because I know SB knows that once you push the start button, मैं जब बोलना शुरू करता हूं तो फिर रोकना मुश्किल है मुझे, ये थोड़ा एक दिक्कत है. And this is a very exciting subject, as all of you know. But I just want to add 3 or 4 last points which relate more to attitude and approach. I really appreciated the presentation on local climate adaptation, by the way, because I think that's absolutely critical, and there are so many solutions. So the first one I just want to say is something which my dad used to tell in the old days of the early telephones. And you used to get the phone, and then you'd be saying, hello, 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 and people would even blow to clear the line, फूक मार के telephone को साफ करो क्योंकि सुनाई नहीं दे रही. And he was talking, and there was an operator. So he was telling the operator, can you please talk more loudly? And operator said, sir, kindly listen more loudly. So the most important thing for us is to begin to listen more loudly to indigenous peoples, elders, men, women, youth, non-human neighbors. What are insects, birds, trees, crops telling us? How is the song of the river changing? These are things we have to listen to. Second is to move from the sectoral to a more integrated understanding, especially of landscapes as they fit together. What's the relation between that microclimate and the mesoclimate, which was mentioned before? How does the whole landscape function as backup? You have the forest, you have the farm, you have the grazing area, you have the aquatic, you have the water. These systems are all part of a production system. They are not separated into forest and agriculture. They're part of a landscape production system in which humans are a key actor. So then I think the other one, which I think I find seems simple to say, but I always get pushback. And that is, we need to return to complexity. Complexity is vital. We talk about biodiversity, we need biocultural diversity in scale of focus, in terms of species, in the mixture of crops, in landscape mosaics, in institutions, in products and markets. The market system for the last how many decades has pushed simplification, value chain, one major product, etc. We need to change that, incorporate multiple products from a landscape, even multiple services. We need lalas and bhanias and mandis, which are saying we want multiple products, not just one. We want different varieties, not just one. और पैसे भी देंगे हम इसके लिए, because we will create the demand. Then, of course, organizing and linkages, which has been mentioned already, but indigenous peoples, community organizations, farmers organizations, organizations of small scale producers, organizations of merchants, organizations of consumers, organization among scientists and government, of course. All of these are absolutely key, and Professor Roy has written so much about that bilateral matching institutions. We need bilateral matching resilience now, and that has to come from the ground up. Last point, which is that when I was speaking to some Native American elders here in the US, a very wise woman said, it's not so difficult. You just remember 3 R's. First one, relationships. Everything is about relationships between ourselves, within our family, within our community, between communities and other communities, between local and state and national and global, and between non-human neighbors. We have relationships, and those relationships are vital. Second, reciprocity. अब पता नहीं हिंदी में एसबी रॉय रेसिप्रोसिटी आप कैसे कहोगे, पर मतलब ये है कि you don't take without giving. Everything you should do with a view to giving back also, reciprocity. And third are responsibility. This was mentioned earlier. Responsibility is vital. And that means responsibility for so many of our own actions. Final story, we had a farmer from Ethiopia we took to Copenhagen to the Global Climate Change Conference. And he was asked to speak in front of 5,000 people. And he said, in my community, the climate is changing. The wind is drier. The rain is erratic. The plants are crying. And he said, it's my fault. तो हैरान हो गए सब, कह रहे हैं कि ये अपने आप के ऊपर दोष कैसा ले रहा है? He said, yes, it's my fault. I'm not behaving correctly as a human being. I'm not respecting the plants. I'm not playing my proper cultural role in looking after the natural environment. I'm not doing my work properly. It's my fault, climate change. So you can imagine if all of us took that viewpoint, there's nothing which we could not accomplish. And I'm sorry to take so much time as usual, but this is a very, very important subject. Already other speakers have given excellent suggestions on the path forward and how to move with this. But I would just end by saying it's not a simple or one single change. Change of mindset is needed throughout. A complete change is needed. And that will be difficult, but we can work on that by starting at whichever level we have the influence on and trying to link to those at other levels, bearing in mind always that listening to those people who are on the land and helping them to create a livelihood which will maintain that beautiful diversity which we are so absolutely blessed to have received when we were born. So let's pass that on. Thank you so much.
The concept that you have introduced, it just touched the core of all of us, and all the points that you have made. It is and we need to change our mindsets at all levels. I think Professor Roy, in response to Jeff. Michael.
Can you hear me?
Good evening, Professor S.B. Rai.
Can you hear me, Jeff? For so much of the traditional knowledge, the wisdom of the community, the nature, the way it is harmonized and documented by Jeff Marvelous. The nature's natural phenomena and the community nature's natural process. There is development. We manipulate God nature beyond the that becomes dangerous. There are many things provided by nature have to be sensitive. The way the natural community, I'll call it natural community, for living close to nature, watch, learn, and try to support nature. Thank you so much.
end of today's this workshop. And we will now request our chairperson for the session, Dr. Kolyan Kumar Chakraborty, who is a retired IS officer, did his PhD from Harvard University, ex-secretary to Government of India. He has headed developmental, educational, and cultural sectors in Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh. National museums, sorry, just a second. National Museums at Delhi and Bhopal, Lalit Kala Academy, Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, and National University of Educational Planning and Administration at Delhi. He has taken institutions out to communities to help nurse their habitats and knowledge systems, harvested their knowledge to improve their economy and reduce insurgency, taken institutions out of preoccupation with events and exhibitions to engage them in building relations among communities, cultures, disciplines, and nations. He has published internationally across the disciplines. So may I request our chairperson for the session today, Dr. Chakraborty, to kindly have his comments, and also if there is any question and answer to facilitate the discussion. Those who are joining us online and here offline, if you have any questions, comments, so we can share with sir in this session, and then sir will direct.
And basically which gets online and offline. I've had the privilege in most of my career to handle the college and culture and development mixes in many ways. So arts, ecology, environment have been constants in their relationship in this environment. Now the very valuable lecture that I listened to, I mean, work with giving my experience and offer up very good solutions. It is obvious that we are now in the anthroposophic phase, as we say. It is the sixth phase of the station. We already had 5 phases of execution, which were induced by the nature. This time, we are facing the 6th phase of extinction, which is essentially by human being and human itself. So we do not need any nuclear. We do not need any. We do not need any geological cataclysm to bring ourselves and the human entities on the Earth planet to an untimely. So climate change or biological diversity are essentially things to and things on. And while diversity is maybe chaotic, and when we are talking about it, we need to evolve things to combat change, as Dr. Rai is Dr. Rai, to climate participate community for direct experience. Now, we have given for instance, about 3,500 joint forest studies, which work on evolving a new system of intellectual property right, because you have to still be a global active regime, and at the same time involve local terms of nomenclature, etc. So we introduced workshops which are directed by indigenous communities and the professional customers, biologists, anthropologists, etc. Where we involve in the terms of local language, terms of bioactive contribution, toxic degradation, and third party assurance. Because these are the terms which you use in the international intellectual property as partners. We are talking about giving the right back to nature. If you have to give right to nature, we have to first recognize that the communities are suffering from an loss of memory and languages, from anesthesia and amnesia. And it is that language which has to be tested. And it is happening, and diversity of languages, which shows us the biocultural diversity. And therefore, we have started our cultural diversity initiatives in local languages in terms of not to be making a call that we recognize there. I mean, this year, the job was only half done in any form. And the basic lesson is that knowledge is kind of global knowledge. It has to be testable, replicable, and falsifiable. So, because it goes in the lab of nature, knowledge will grow in the lab of laboratory. It cannot be different. And in fact, the knowledge is in the lab of nature and harvested by the communities should be recognized to enrich language of the laboratory. So therefore, that is the which is practiced. It is related. In fact, we set up about to these 3,500 forest communities. We decided to cannot move from the Western organizing system of timber forest and plantation to non-industry and natural research. So we have about 150,000 hectares of land to these recognize who among them and where had that knowledge of the landscape and the mindscape to bring the conversation between the cultural diversity and the biodiversity parameters in the area. They are not asked to do any plantation. They are not asked to usually explore. They are not asked to usually either do combat this they are only asked to recognize what is happening. So recognize the plants which are recognize the biodiversity moving. And the biodiversity they were done, they can almost species, I mean, which are not recognized in the taxa of the 5 stories of the botanical circle in Kolkata. Or in the Indian Museum, which stores about 20 years of on. So they started giving names. They knew that, and all we had to do is to record. Again, that was the task, which was very complete because we had vast of capacity. Similarly, discussion about food security or food safety. Now, There is topic diversity and food security, which has to be understood in a wider way. Because food and medicine are intertwined. Every item of food is a medicinal item, every medicinal item is a food item. And food safety or security protocol demands that we recognize this situation with the discussing so therefore it. And so we started using these threads to develop so all that the minor policy federation did was to process and package the knowledge understood, dominated, and given by the local communities. We also packaged and marketed. And they also acted as the food and the medicine persons in these food and medicine hospitals. And they were in the cabinet to ask for these in their. Now, it is obvious that politicians, I mean, and they're not so sensitive and do not understand what the community needs, but you have to address the problem. You have to understand that they are not just vote bank, they are also the person. Then, about you see the cricket singing or the spoil time, or you see the human and the non-human communities in the forest, the susurrus of the trees, flowing stream. Now these are things which are not unreal. That's why we food sector. We celebrated a festival of sector. I mean, the mention was made of the Northeast. Now, the Northeast has 100 sectors, North Line, North Line, North etc. With each of them has a beginning of preserving ancient relic, each has a system of having the description of keeping that area in life from as on. So we planted the growth in the union, and then we invited Southeast Asia and Southeast Asia countries to celebrate that sacred growth. And then we put that knowledge in a kind of purpose. Then we created an exhibition out of these. And then we took out the from Bhopal to Pune, and there we exhibited the exhibition along with the sacred grove parts of the country. And the temple communities in Viraj, there were 60 temple communities who were maintaining security. All those secret groves were dying. And then they witnessed this picture. He said, you think that the secret groves are so important that you have to come all the way, all these managers, to incite us to action. All right. We shall regulate that. So the individual exhibition, because action is instead of so there are many such devices which we can operationalize, and we also have levers. So we can develop. And we want to you see, family careful festival. There is a regular annual. We celebrated that festival along with the community there. And It was the Utah, and that kind of a more significant success was different places. That is sacred and that is profane, that there is no distinction, that there is a parallel reach between the two. I mean, actually, conveyed. There is no big it was by all communities, leadership were niches. So, all I would and there are the process of external migration in this country. We know about it. We know that these paper policy was brought in by Prime Minister of the candidates. We know that the movement from paper to non-paper policy has not been effective. We know that before you are able to introduce a change to participative community management, you have to do that 95% of their languages, their terms and numbers, their approaches to classification, their systems of naming are dying. And unless we revive those names, recognize them, and bring them back into circulation, there is no way that the bicultural diversity can be preserved. So we are talking about we are tribal and a romantic approach, and the tribal is some kind of a what shall I say, the holy cow, I mean, which has to be respected, but not really given actual worship. I mean, so if the tribalism is accepted, then we need substitution of an ecological civilization or a technological civilization. We need a kind of a re-tribal, and if we need to have a re-tribalization, then you also have to work towards arresting the internal organization, the external organization. The internal organization is reduced honest level, it was 50% at the 90% to only 8% today. Though the rate is that it will go to 35%. But much of this model is only on record. Because in the development phase, it was considered that whatever is recorded as even revenue line, is known as what? Whether it is no. So they need to overcome this obstruction in order to justice and right to the preserve. Let's the right to environmental, natural condition, not this because which is followed in Australia or the United States, that whatever is given by or whatever left unoccupied by the belongs not. No, the community owns everything, and it is obligation and also its right to restore the commons, the knowledge commons, which is being improved, is happening enclosure day by day. So if you is arrested, and then one is to move beyond all these discussions to as what participatory climate is very policy. Now, what is local and what is global? I mean, there was talk of discussion about the wetlands in the sacred groves in the northeast and other places. Now we have right here, the Indo-Gangetic and Eastern India. Now, these Indo-Gangetic plains are made by the Himalayan river, and it also abuts on the sea. So the mountain, sea, land, environment is closely interlinked. So if one has to act locally while thinking globally, one has to look at this Ganga and also the blue water infrastructure of the ocean and understand that not only the land, but also the 200 meters they measure how much food you would not only fish, but there is a lot of food diversity there. That has to be preserved. So one has to act locally in understanding this significance of the sea, water, land, and biodiversity, and bring it back together. We in Pastor, we celebrate the Livelihood festival along with the tribal people. In that every river, every spot, every rock is to be treated as part of the dramatic community. Because the dramatic secretary in which every event of used to be a role as an actor in the theater. That was the festival. So they instinctively what we have to understand through scholarship. So it's very important to understand that beyond romanticization and realization, it is very important that we build on the local system without romanticizing not sophisticated into that force, but domestic active force into the local systems. And then practice what we preach by working with the forest and adjacent people, forest to reduce not only the also tangibility. There are stakeholders, there are structures which have been created by the tribal people. 2009, we see there at T20, we established 25. Now it's 100% overall village, because 100% overall village earlier. Who created this? Who created this? And we have evidence on the rock of stations and inscriptions. And like studio, all I can say, investigation and what go on the land through a rebuilding of relationship by linking globally, and those micro and micro geographical actions have to match to it. So as when once Matthew Arnold said that humanity is like islands surrounded by layers of fear. It was conquered not directly, but indirectly by John Bannon. They say humanity is not like you adopt it, but we are part of the name. So it is in Australia. Are you looking at the kind of violence or in Balaso? We are less. We are less. Every individual. Therefore, do not call out or whom the way was the way to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your this final summing up, and thank you all speakers. This is the beginning, and we need your esteemed panelists for finalizing the recommendation of this workshop. So we will be in touch, and we have to draft it together. So we need your cooperation and your inputs for drafting the recommendations for this workshop. We will be in touch. Thank you all our panelists for their excellent deliberations, insights and inputs, and to all the participants, those who have joined online and offline here in our campus, for being with us today for celebrating the World Environment Day. This ecosystem restoration for climate development, and this is an event G20 task force. So I inputs that in this forum today. It will give podcast to draft recommendations for G20. Thank you so much. And we look forward to meeting. Thank you. Namaskar.
So we close it? Yeah.
We close
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. We close here and we request all of you to please join us in the outside. I'm sorry, it was online. My friend Asri on the area and we not be telling you that it's easy, but go. Thank you so much. Bye, Jeff.
Goodbye.